The concepts of legality and morality are usually argued in very blurred lines, and sometimes due to the social conditioning of the state, people often argue about the legality of a specific situation as if it were to be moral. However, not everything that is legal or illegal is a reflection of morality or immorality. The same can also be true in the opposite case. Not everything that is moral or immoral can equate to what is legal or illegal. Let's do a thinking exercise. Let's take an example of a post on Twitter made by Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of so-called Israel. The video in question was produced by Prager, a website and YouTube channel, not a university. And the host of this video is British Colonel Richard Kemp, or as I like to call him, Dick Kemp. You can probably assume that because this individual is a British colonel, he will be arguing in defense of the country that he serves as well as the countries that he allies with. If someone is in the military, chances are that they will argue in defense of that nation that they have sworn to protect. Usually, people in the military who speak against said nation are putting themselves at risk. To keep in mind as well, the British colonel who serves the United Kingdom is also an ally with Israel the state, which means this will be in defense of Israel the state. In the post, the claim that the invasion of Palestine is justified is a moral one, even going as far as to say it outright. Although the person in the video is not the same as the person making the claim, meaning the person who posted the video. These two individuals may very well have differing views on the subject matter. Try to figure out if the person is making a moral claim or a legal claim.
There are two views of the Israeli military, what you hear in most of the media and the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth. I was the commander of British forces in Afghanistan. I have fought in combat zones around the world, including Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Macedonia and Iraq. I was also present throughout the conflict in Gaza in 2014. Based on my experience and on my observations, the Israel Defense Force, the IDF, does more to safeguard the rights of civilians in a combat zone than any other army in the history of warfare.
As we can see, not only did the colonel of the British Army make a moral claim, even going as far as to justify his own ventures in several imperialist interventions, but he outright claims his position to be the truth. What is the truth? How do we determine the truth? In this claim, he is using his experiences and observations as an argument for the sake of the appeal of the truth. In other words, this is an anecdotal claim. Anecdotal claims are not always wrong or worthless, but they do not stand up to scrutiny in the eyes of the question of legal versus moral. These historical conflicts that he participated in have no contextual relationship with the conflict in Palestine. He is using these wars as an attempt to justify his authority on the subject, which he has no actual authority from. The statements that he is making serves to obfuscate the conversation and distract the audience by making them think, oh, he has been in other wars, therefore he is an authority on the subject, when in actuality, it is a fallacious argument from authority. Some of these very conflicts that he is discussing, including the Irish conflict, does in fact have parallels to the Palestinian conflict. But it is a conflict with the United Kingdom, not with each other. This conflict with the United Kingdom is well over 800 years old and is the reason why there is segregation between Northern and Southern Ireland. It is the reason why there is a Northern and Southern Ireland to begin with, and this also stands with the fact that Israel is a former British colony and currently a US puppet state. British Army Colonel Dick Kemp is making a moral argument for an unjustified invasion. What's even more fascinating about this argument is that he's not even making a legal one, because he can't. According to the United Nations report in 2014 on the settlement of Israel on Palestine, the international law has ruled that the settlement and invasion is in fact illegal. The 2014 resolution with the Geneva Convention clearly states the participation in high contracting parties express their deep concern about recurring violation of international humanitarian law by all parties of the conflict, and as such also by non-state actors, including the context of military operation and attacks directed against and emanating from the occupied Palestinian territory since the Conference of High Contracting Parties on the 5th of December 2001, and resulting in greater suffering of the civilian population. They are particularly concerned about the number of victims among civilian population in densely populated areas. The participating high contracting parties express their deep concern about the impact of the continued occupation of the occupied Palestinian territory. They recall that, according to the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on the 9th of July of 2004, the construction of the wall in the occupied Palestinian territory, including in and around East Jerusalem, at least insofar as it deviates from the Green Line and its associated regime, are contrary to international humanitarian law. They equally express their deep concern for the international humanitarian law standpoint about certain measures taken by the occupying power in the occupied Palestinian territory, including the closure of the Gaza Strip. They reaffirm the illegality of the settlement in the said territory and of the expansion thereof, and of the related unlawful seizure of property, as well as the transfer of prisoners into the territory of the occupying power.
Oh, wow.
Keep in mind that Israel is a settler colonial state using a moral argument. A moral argument for something that is illegal by international law. The only reason why they are not being persecuted under international law is because the nation is backed by the United States and the United Kingdom. Therefore, the international law of the Fourth Geneva Convention is ignored. After all, why would you try to prosecute something that you have a financial interest in? And keep in mind that this was voted on in an overwhelming 64 out of 10 in the United Nations General Assembly resolution of that year. Okay. This isn't the only time that PragerU has made an appeal to morality in the name of the law. PragerU has made a video arguing a solution for solving homelessness. The conclusion, surprisingly, is not give them a home, but getting tougher on persecuting the homeless for property crime. This crime in question is an act of setting up camp on sidewalks and in parks. However, when it is time for PragerU to use the law as a basis for their argument, they fall particularly flat. Take a look at this clip here.
The Venice Boulevard underpass on the border of Los Angeles and Culver City brings home this point. It's one of thousands of concrete structures in Los Angeles County, but there's a curious detail. The Los Angeles side is full of tents, and the Culver City side is empty. Why? Because the two cities have different public policies. Los Angeles has effectively decriminalized public camping and drug consumption, while Culver City enforces the law. This pattern, that the homeless go where the policy environment is the most permissive, can be seen up and down the West Coast.
Huh? That's rather strange. They just contradicted their own claim about the law. It seems as if the law is only convenient to them when it serves their agenda. If Los Angeles, say, went to the lengths of decriminalizing encampment and drug consumption, then Los Angeles, by definition, wouldn't be failing to enforce the law. It is a law that they revoked in the first place. If Culver City has a different set of laws and Los Angeles does not have those set of laws, then Los Angeles would be breaking the law by abiding to Culver City's law. Encampment and drug consumption under this example wouldn't be viewed as a criminal act in the first place. Even their source contradicts their claim in the first place. The Los Angeles Times reported the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled last year that homeless individuals may not be held criminally responsible for sleeping on government property when no alternative shelter is available. Both Bonin, whose council district touches Santa Monica, Culver City, and El Segundo, said he believes many cities in the region are not complying with this decision. Such a disparity can be seen on Venice Boulevard at the 405 freeway, Bonin said, with homeless people on the LA side of the street, but not on the Culver City side. Quote, people are understandably asking why the hell it is, Bonin said, and it is because the city of Los Angeles is obeying the court dictates, and the city across the street isn't. Not to mention that the city of Los Angeles did in fact change the law to match the rest of the county. Now, I could make an anecdotal argument and appeal to emotion that I did used to live in Los Angeles. I've been employed and still had to sleep in my car because the job in which I had wasn't paying well enough for me to have a roof over my head and put food in my belly. This is the unfortunate reality of the rich suburbs of Los Angeles that have maintained a consistent trend of gentrification, evicting and renovating the homes of poorer people so that those poor people can't buy their old homes back at the market value that it has been marked up to. I could very well easily make the anecdotal appeal to emotion to drive my argument home in the very dishonest light that the British Army Colonel Dick Kemp made, but it doesn't really reflect the discussion or the framing of the discussion of legality versus morality. Legality doesn't reflect morality because what is legal is a binary set of rules enforced by the state, where morality is subjective and isn't as black and white as most people suggest that it is. Take, for example, the court ruling of Derek Chauvin, the man who extrajudicially murdered George Floyd. This individual, a badge police officer, took a report of George Floyd and decided on his own whether or not George Floyd is guilty or innocent of a crime. George Floyd did not have a due process available. George Floyd was never represented in court, and the ultimate crime that George Floyd committed, if we can even call it a crime, was that he allegedly used a counterfeit dollar bill to purchase cigarettes. And what's sad is that even on the assumption that George Floyd used a counterfeit currency to buy cigarettes, he can never be tried in court now because he is dead. Derek Chauvin is privileged that he even got a sentence in the first place, or that he even got a trial in the first place. Let's take another example of the reverse situation. Let's look at Mumia Abu-Jamal. Jamal, a former Black Panther activist, journalist, and talk show host, was accused of murdering Daniel Faulkner, a white police officer. In this trial, they primarily appealed to eyewitnesses and the word of the hospital guard and a police officer who claimed that Jamal stated in the hospital, quote, "I killed the motherfucker and I hope the motherfucker dies." It's never known as to whether or not he actually said it, but that's what they took as for evidence. When it came time to do a forensic test on the firearm that Jamal supposedly had used, they never tested the firearm for fingerprints or whether or not Jamal had fired the weapon in the first place. The only confirmation that they had was a testimony from the Philadelphia Police Department that the bullet found in the officer's wound was similar to the barrel that Jamal used. In the end, the case led to Jamal being sentenced to death, and the paradox of all of this is that this sentencing is a double standard to the case of George Floyd's murderer. Even though Derek Chauvin was persecuted, Chauvin still had a fair trial, and even having his trial attempted for a repeal. Jamal was sentenced on an accusation, and such accusation with little evidence via hearsay led to life in prison on death row. To make an argument on the law is to define a rigid set of codes and how said codes were violated, whereas a moral argument is defined as a subjective set of codes and how that argument stands in the case of good and evil. Such definition of good and evil isn't as simple as one may think, but there is one thing to be observed in the previous examples, which is the argument of legality is often determined by the state, and the argument of morality is argued when the state doesn't have the law in their favor.